Now that's how you start a show. Welcome to the Nick Nice Show. I'm your host, Nick Nice. More importantly, thank you for being my neighbor and my friend. We have a great show lined up for you today. As a matter of fact, we have a nice interview with Mary Honeybee Morrison, the prolific writer. If you haven't heard about her, check her out. We're talking about sex, baby. Also, we have the Nice Three, which is the nicest three videos in the music game right now. And of course, we end the show with Said Nicely. But first, we start with the nice list.
You say you don't care whether she hit or not. Let me make everybody uncomfortable by telling you I do care. But let me tell you why. It's not about him then. It's about you. And here's what I mean by that. We keep talking about the guys. We know you have no business putting your hands on a woman. I don't know how many times I got to reiterate that. But as a man who was raised by women, see, I know what I'm going to do if somebody touches a female member of my family. I know what I'm going to do. I know what my boys are going to do. I know what I'm going to have to remind myself that I work for the worldwide leader. I'm going to have to get law enforcement officials involved because of what I'm going to be tempted to do. But what I've tried to employ the female members of my family, some of who you all met and talked to and what have you, is that, again, and this is what I've done this all my life, let's make sure we don't do anything to provoke wrong actions. Because if I come or somebody else come, whether it's law enforcement officials, your brother, or the fellas that you know, if we come after somebody has put their hands on you, it doesn't negate the fact that they already put their hands on you. So let's try to make sure that we can do our part in making sure that that doesn't happen. Now, you got some dudes that are just horrible, and they're going to do it anyway. And there's never an excuse to put your hands on a woman. But domestic violence or whatever the case may be, with men putting their hands on women is obviously a very real issue in our society. And I think that just talking about what guys shouldn't do, we got to also make sure that you can do your part to do whatever you can do to try to make sure it doesn't happen. We know they're wrong. We know they're criminal. We know they probably deserve to be in jail. In Ray Rice's case, he probably deserves more than the 2-game suspension, which we both acknowledged. But at the same time, we also have to make sure that we learn as much as we can about elements of provocation. Not that there's real provocation, but the elements of provocation. You got to make sure that you address it, because what we've got to do is do what we can to try to prevent the situation from happening in any way.
Now, before talking about this whole Stephen A. Smith, Ray Rice domestic violence situation, I wanted to play that clip first so that everyone can see and hear what was said. Because if you all didn't know it, much like Stephen A., I consider myself a wordsmith. See what I did there? And when you're a writer, words are important. You choose them as carefully as possible, especially when you're talking about sensitive issues. In that piece, I didn't hear him say anything as far as it's okay or justified for a man to hit a woman. In fact, I heard him say several times quite the opposite. What he was referring to is that it's important to address women hitting men and not in self-defense, because that could potentially provoke a negative outcome. Consider this portion of today's program listening comprehension. And if you don't believe me, go ahead and rewind this video and see what he said. I'll wait. Now, this portion is what I call reading comprehension. And since provoke was one of the buzzwords that sent people into a frenzy, let's define what provoke means. It means to stimulate or give rise or incite or stir up. But you get the point. So here's a text for some of what he said. Take a second, read over it, pause the video if you have to. And again, I'll wait. My point is, I understand that people get emotional, but Stephen A. Smith was suspended for a week because some people took his comments, Michelle Beadle, and ran with them, interpreting them to say a man is justified in hitting a woman if she hits him first, because that is a form of provocation. Did you get that from what you heard or read? Me neither. Now, I realize why listening and reading comprehension was so important growing up, but yet these days it seems like people can't accurately comprehend what's being said or written anymore. So instead of Time magazine doing a story about a made-up word like bae, which set Twitter ablaze with some very funny commentary, maybe they should do a story on literacy and comprehension. And if they decide to do one, I got a title for you in the vein of Time titles. Like, how about Going In? An in-depth look at listening and reading comprehension in America. Or SMH, why listening and reading comprehension is falling to a head shaking low. Or, you know what I'm saying? Why reading and listening comprehension is falling and less Americans actually do know what you're saying. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Mary B. Morrison after this.
The Nick Knight Show, sponsored by Audi of America. Truth in Engineering.